What did you think when he said that he was gonna smack Bazaar in Detroit?
Oh, I said that. I said low blow.
All right, so during the Shady 2.0 with Slaughterhouse and Yellow Wolf, right? What work did you do?
Oh, I just did the promo. Like I said, I was doing promo. So it's almost like I was a server. Like at a restaurant, I went from, and we don't want to go to eating and anal part if we want to clean it up for our PG audience. It go from being a cook where you in the kitchen cooking and not overseeing, but you in the behind the scenes making sure, because the artists are the cooks. But you got to be the one that, hey, I got to go to the store, get the seasoning. I gotta make sure the butter, all of that. That's what kind of artist management and people, the support team and the music business people do. And when you in marketing and promo, you're to come the server. You're just serving the food up. And during that time I was in marketing, so I was just serving the food up. So you can't really have a ear or A&R. You gotta say, hey, this record ain't banging or it's not working. So I was in the promo aspect of working, doing some consulting work with Shady.
That was so disappointing what happened with Slaughterhouse. I know for M too, because he wanted those guys to be so successful. From your point of view, what really happened with Slaughterhouse?
I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't behind the scenes, and at that time, me and Kino Childry, who was, Roy's manager forever. We kind of like lost contact, because once again, Kino's always been in the artist management. And
Right.
I went back to being in the promo marketing side of things. So I had to have that kind of, so I wasn't in the behind the scenes of it. But honestly, what happened with that? Well, shit, I would say Twitter and X, whatever, because I always seen Joe Budden was very opinionated, and I always knew that Joe Budden would, hey man, if Joe Budden don't like a piece of if his corned beef sandwich at that time, if it's bad, he would go on Twitter and be like, hey man, fuck that deli in fucking Brunswick, New Jersey. They some bitch ass motherfuckers. So a lot of what you're talking about was a Twitter era, because people just had Twitter fingers. And I do remember, I'm trying to use my noodle. You trying to have my noodle go back maybe like 12 years or 13 years. And I do remember, like, okay, I was doing promo with Shady, but then I do see like Joe Budden would say stuff like out of turn on Twitter. Cause that's when Joe was real. That's when Twitter was our Instagram, and Instagram wasn't around and everybody was like on Twitter, and that's why people lost their jobs and shit and had to resign from Congress because of past Twitter comments. So I do remember it was, man, Joe was like not happy with what was going on. And I think that spilled into like real life industry where maybe Interscope, but I'm speculating on here. Like I said, I wasn't around in that part of in that house of the part of the music business. But I do think what they say back then got you in deep trouble.
Yeah. It was really disappointing, man. I was a big fan of Joe's music, all the mood musics and stuff like that, and Slaughterhouse. But yeah, I think that there was a lot of problems, man. I mean, they've admitted that they had bad business. It was always bad business. I don't think necessarily saying was shady, but just like their inner workings of the business.
Now, I will tell you something, really. I will tell you something. Being kind of like, since we're in a private conversation, outside of my responsibility of like getting a check and working for like Shady during that time, as Mark Hicks, the music, because I consider myself like a studier of the music business, even a philosopher of the music business. I didn't agree with I didn't agree with, and this may be a little bit long-winded, but I didn't agree with um Joe Budden, personally him. I'm talking about Joe Budden. I didn't agree with his ideologies and his thought process, because it was some dear friends, Paul included, that I thought he was speaking out against. And I didn't like that. I personally, and this wasn't me being a paid spokesman from Shady. This is just Mark Hicks from Highland Park, Michigan, who, to God be the glory, was in the music industry. I didn't like Joe Budden moves he was making during that time. And this ain't like no behind it. This is just what was public and what he said on Twitter. I thought
Oh
he
no, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that most people,
well, no,
they love how controversial he is, but at the same time, I think that a lot of people have an issue with the way that he handles things, though. You
yeah,
know?
because no, because it goes all the way back. Let me get the mic for a second, because one of my friends, who back in the promo, this is before the this is before the Eminem explosion. It's a brother by the name of Rob Love. And Rob Love was a national director of Def Jam. He did what in the Virginias, what I did, and it's, I've said what my marketing company and my street promotions company, he did that in the Virginias. And to God be the glory, he got hired by Def Jam through Kevin Lyles to run their national company, their national promo. Rob Rob Love. So what happened, he was doing such a great job, Def Jam gave him his own record label called Spit Records. And his first act was Joe Budden. So Pump It Up, in essence, came through, and people will correct me if I'm wrong, but his first act was Joe Budden at Def Jam with the Pump It Up and that whole era, right? And I didn't like, and I was hearing stuff, and I never came out of the mouth of Rob Love, but I heard at that time it was a lot of craziness going on in the Def Jam, the whole dynamics of Rob Love, Joe Buttons. And I'm speaking from me, and I could get corrected, and I might have to make an apology, but I didn't like, because I was team Rob Love, because Rob Love was family. I met him like in 94, 95 at like a convention. And I met him I was Tommy Boy Detroit and he was Tommy Boy Virginia. So we had a kinship there already. We had a bond there. So he was my friend, and I didn't like how that went on. So that was like, I didn't like what I heard Joe Budden did. And Joe Budden even talk about this to a certain degree. He didn't name names. He don't shit on Rob Love, from what I know. So I didn't like that. So then when the whole how Royce and Joe Budden, they on the tour, they found on like a D12 tour, I believe that's how one of the first remnants of Slaughterhouse came to be, because Royce was on tour with D12 and Joe Budden was on tour with D12, and they kind of built a bond, like Royce and Joe, and then they went out. I think that's how the story go.
No, that's not how Slaughterhouse was made, but I remember the tour you're talking about. That's when D12 had the Return of the Dozen mixtape and everything like that.
Oh yeah, that's right. But yeah, and on that tour, and I'm not trying to be a history revisionist, but I remember that Royce and because at that time, what happened, D12, they got rid of, they was going through managers. I don't want to say a lot, but they rehired. They didn't rehire me back, but they rehired the co-founder of
Rico Shelton,
Dirty Management, Rico Shelton, my former partner, and they rehired him. So Rico is very adroit at putting together shows, especially up in Canada. So he put this together with D12, Joe Budden, and Royce. And once again, I said that was the remnants, that was the seeding of getting Slaughterhouse together. And of course, that you know, you could Keno and other people, Crystal Isaacs, that was a part of that, a part of the history. They know way more. But I'm just the chatter I was hearing in terms of Joe Budden. So now now we graduate to 2026, and I watched some of Joe Budden interviews, and a change was made. Some of the way me and him see the world, I agree with. But back then, with the whole Wu Tang, he had issues with Wu Tang and and certain things of rumors, just the way he was kind of making subtle shots at Shady Records. That's family, man. Shady Records is family, you know? And
Right.
so I didn't like that. I didn't like that. And he would call out, and once again, this is public, and I'm not trying to. Paul is Paul, and Paul has a he has a very intelligent mouth than me, and he can speak, and he has a platform to speak. But as me being a friend, as I'm sure if Paul has stood up for me when I wasn't around. And one of my things is a real friend is standing up for you when you're not around. And I've had that happen with Paul Rosenberg that stood up for me. Proof used to always stand up for me. And it's an endearing term for a friend to do that. So when when I would hear in publicly when Joe Budden would publicly take a shot at Rosenberg, you know, Paul Rosenberg, he would come out and name, you know, this is like I would be like, yo, I'm like, what the fuck?
I remember.
I mean, I'm just saying that it would. I'm just saying that it would. It it offended me. So me and him didn't see you, of course. With Paul being damn near like family with me, it was a pot shot that I didn't like, and it didn't have to. And it wasn't Paul influence. It was just me being his boy. Like, you know, one of your boys. If somebody take a pot shot at one of your boys, now your boy is gonna be offended by it, but you gonna get like, man, what the fuck he talking about? My boy Dion for what the fuck is that about? So yeah, so I did, but as I noticed, Joe Budden has become very mature in this current state where he did it, and y'all like, man, I fuck with y'all on that. I see what he's saying. Yeah. Even though the way he
He's
moves,
definitely gotten better. He
yeah,
still
even
has his moments.
yeah,
He
his
still has his
business
moments.
finds. I'm like, yeah, I fuck with Joe. I see some stuff, and this just happened recent, but back then, and even when back in the whole Def Jam era, I didn't like some of the stuff he was doing. And to be honest with you, he's even in certain interviews, he kind of like this his current his not current, but this his past ways. He's dissed it.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, you know, like when people are creative in a certain way, sometimes they lack certain skills, like social skills, or like they're like quirky in kind of weird ways, right? And I feel like Joe has always come across that way, where it's like the way that he thinks is so different from like this average person. Right. So the way things come across to him, the way that he talks to people, or how he interprets the way people talk to him is very different. But like what you're talking about with the whole Paul thing, what I remember was when he was on Everyday Struggle and he was dissing the Eminem Revival album, and he was saying, I don't know if this is because Paul went and took a job over at Def Jam or what, and stuff like that. That's what I remember him talking about Paul. But
Oh, that was just a microcosm. But you're right though. Everyday Struggle gave him a platform, and there was some other things where he was openly, and especially on Twitter. Maybe he deleted some stuff, but no, he would basically call out Paul like, "Oh, that's Rosenberg, that's Paul Rosenberg," because most people didn't really. Well, I can't say that. The Eminem fans they've always, you know, Paul's always had his fans from because back then the album covers always had our names and our everything on there. So that's why even people to this day now, people still follow me on on my Instagram page and my Facebook page. They just remember I was one of the original managers of D12, and they just remember they ask me questions. They, sometimes I entertain them DMing me, but yeah, I talk to them and they some of them are my friends. Um, but yeah, he kind of made it more where the Eminem fan base, that Eminem ecosystem, they knew Paul Rosenberg, but sometimes he would be dropping stuff that the average hip hop person would know who Paul Rosenberg is, but he would be kind of bringing his name up, if you will.
I think I remember him making some comments like Paul was protecting M too much, or like kind of like isolating him or something, like something along those lines. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he make some comments like that?
Yeah, he did that. That was it. That was his shtick.
Yeah, yeah. It's if I remember correctly, he was saying that because when he was going at M during that time, and it created a whole issue with Slaughterhouse. It was bad. It was really bad, man.
Yeah, it really was. But I think, and I speak this from a personal perspective, and he kind of, and I don't want to, like, I know we live, so I can't verbatim say it, but in life, sometimes when you walk in a storm, y- uh, I said that earlier, sometimes when you walk through a storm, you don't even, the person beside you making your storm much lighter, makes the storms much lighter. It's just something about, like, if you got somebody, if you in a fucked up thing, and I guess that's why God created relationship, Adam Eve per se, it makes it way less difficult. Because even the girl I talked about when Proof died, me and her really not on good terms, but she was with me, and she was my girl. We lived together and everything, and I don't even know how I could have made it. And you speaking to a guy that me and her really not at this time, we not on good terms, but I don't even know how I could have made it out of that storm when Proof died if it wasn't her being around and having my back. So I say that to Joe, he would always be taking pot shots at Paul and different things, but he didn't understand the level of the introductions that Paul was helping in his career get to a certain level and get through certain doors. So when he would be quote unquote, and it's all public, I'm not talking about no behind the scenes stuff or stuff that I don't feel comfortable elaborating with me being a dear friend of Paul, but I'm talking about what's in the public. I'm looking, and once again, if I didn't know Paul Rosenberg and I didn't, well, I met Joe like for a cup of coffee like twice or whatever. I mean, I'm just not for coffee, but I'm saying I'm in terms of I'm just being, not literally, but just like shaking his hand or something. I would say that Joe should be kind of grateful of giving, you know, of Paul doing certain things to him, because it's certain people per se, it's certain artists in Detroit that would have loved to be signed to Shady Records. And he has this opportunity to have a platform of being on Shady Records. And it's Detroit artists that some artists, some people hate my guts because they're like, man, Mark, you fat piece of shit. Man, you could have helped me get on Shady Records. You could have did more. And I'm looking at Joe sitting at a top echelon rape record label like Shady Records, and kind of like talking publicly about behind the stuff things that he shouldn't talk about in public. It's certain artists that been known M for years when M when M was in the salad days, that didn't get a shot, but per se, Joe Budden got a shot. So I think he should be very grateful.
Well,
Not to say he isn't or isn't, but I'm just saying some people, and I'm not alone on this. It's a lot of people that feel the way I feel. Like, dude, you up here talking shit, and you up here like, man, dude, Slaughterhouse is on, man, Slaughterhouse is on Shady Records. He had a premium hip hop, he had a premium record label. He on Interscope, and you talking shit, but it's some artists that stood by, that was open up for him, or who knew him before the Eminem explosion, and they didn't get a shot. And about Cook, about Crook, was Slaughterhouse more talented? That's that theory. We could have a 24-hour conversation about that. So who knows and who cares? But you got to look at that from other people's perspective of that.
Right. But like getting Slaughterhouse on Shady took a while too, because everybody had to get their record situation situated, right? And what happened was, I know that they were saying that Joe had signed to Amalgam Digital at that time, and he denied it. He said that I didn't sign that contract or whatever. They forged my signature, and then it came back that it really was that he signed it, though, So it was like a whole thing that this came out later when Slaughterhouse fell apart, of course, that it was revealed by the group members that this record contract situation was very difficult.
Well, man, come on though. Come on though. This now let's stop here. Cause I wasn't, like I said it, I've had some issues. Just not like I said, I've only maybe shook the man. I've probably been in his presence probably like 20, 30 seconds or something, right? But I wasn't the biggest fan of Joe Budden. But you got to remember, that's Joe Budden. Joe Budden brand is chaos and all this stuff. You from the love and hip hop. That's what we love about Joe Budden. And once again, I give Joe Budden the ultimate props. His brand is a entertaining brand. That's why that's why his platform is so, the Joe Budden podcast or where that's how he's mesmerized. So I take my hat off to him. That's Joe Budden. So all of that stuff, and that's why when he was talking I'm laughing, because that's the typical day in the life of Joe Budden.
What did you think when he said that he was gonna smack Bizarre in Detroit?
Oh, I said that. I said low blow. I said low blow. I said, now that's where my alumni, when I seen that, once again, that was on I think that was on Twitter, X.
Yep.
I was like, no, you can't make those crazy excursions in this day and time, because Detroit, that's almost Detroit versus everybody comes out, and that is a real thing. And you can't be making those kind of comments. But that's a typical Joe Budden. That, you know what? That's why I keep mentioning, just about the whole aspect of my guy Rob Love, my guy Rosenberg, but I didn't like that. And me and Bizarre till this day, I talked to Bizarre. He has my number. I has his number. We sometimes talk or text, or he invite me to different things, and we talk about, we run into each other. We run into each other on different events, and that's still my guy. But that's alumni. That's still, we part of the Shady alumni, if you will. And I didn't like that. And other people didn't like that, because you're not gonna come in here and I know maybe Bizarre made a comment or whatever, or whatever. I don't remember the exact comment, but you can't.
What happened was when Joe was dissing M about the album and stuff like that, and then Bizarre came out and said that Joe was disloyal after this man gave you a second chance in your career and everything like that, and then you go and do this, right? And then that's when Joe was like, oh, respectfully, I will slap you in Detroit, or yada yada. And then I think Royce even called Joe and was like, stop, like this is not like good, like,
right. Yeah, Joe just be on some bull. Joe just, yeah, that's the type of stuff I didn't like. And I think his follow-up, maybe he did a follow-up or something that I was like, okay. I'm like, all right, wow. But I do, yeah, I really wasn't rocking with Joe at that time. But I do wanna, but then to give him props, he brought the sign on. Him and Royce, well, it was through Royce, but he brought the sign on just to have like Royce come and hang, and he gave the sign some advice on stuff, and maybe they linked. I mean, they did link, and the sign did tell me it was a pretty, because I was almost like, what did he say? when it sounds like, nah, he was pretty cool, and it was very he liked the whole Joe Budden experience when he went to the studio. When we went to Joe Budden's studio.
I think that like someone like Joe had unrealistic expectations when signing to Shady. Like, do you not know like what to expect when you sign to a label like that? Like, he was like, how come M didn't bring us on a world tour? How come M wasn't like more around or involved or some, you know, things along those lines? And it's like, come on, like you should already know how M operates just from watching from the outside. Like he's gonna be focusing on his career. He's gonna do certain things like produce for you, give you features, like little stuff here and there. But like he don't even tour like that. Like, you know, like so
Yeah, yeah. But once again, he put that out to the world, and
right.
so it's you're gonna get some pushback on when he makes those kind of comments.
Mm-hmm.